on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot.
Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How are you today, Dylan?
I'm doing wonderful.
You're doing wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm enjoying the winter wonderland.
It's beautiful outside.
We woke up to a beautiful white snow.
Makes me want to dash through the snow.
Well, it seems lately in Western North Carolina, at least in the last few years, we've had very mild winters. And if we happen to get some snowfall, it's just enough to make a mucky mess.
Yeah, it's just enough to keep the ground kind of, full of mud and everything's just not dried out, but it's not enough to be a beautiful snow.
But we finally got that beautiful snow.
We did.
So we can check that off our winter list.
Our winter to-do list?
Yes.
Okay.
I love it. I think it's beautiful. Makes me happy.
So you were telling me about Marilyn Manson. What the hell is he up to?
Oh my goodness. Several women have come forward with claims of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. One of those women is Evan Rachel Wood, the actress. You may know her from Westworld.
Yeah, so she's like the main character in Westworld.
She was on True Blood. She was like a vampire queen on True Blood. She's been in a lot of movies. She's actually from Raleigh.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, local gal.
Kinda. But yeah, so she was engaged to him. They dated for quite a few years and they were engaged at one point. And she's been very vocal in the past about having suffered, abuse. And wouldn't name her abuser. And then, for whatever reason, she's decided 2021 is the year to speak out. And so she's taken to social media to talk about, the various assaults and the emotional abuse. I mean, if it's true, what a fucking douche.
Well, I mean, some of the things you went over and told me about, some of the just verbal abuse, some of the
racist shit, like
racist,
ethnic slur. Like, she's got Jewish heritage, and he has several Nazi tattoos, and would call her Jew.
Oh,
and would draw swastikas over her bedside table when they were in a fight.
Yeah, there's nothing like a little anti-Semitism.
Like, what the fuck is up with that?
Well, it's pretty shitty. I mean, that's horrible. And some of the multiple girls talked about him going over and over explaining these fantasies that he had about them, like harming them in certain ways, which that would be very, very weird to be around, right? If someone just kept on I can't stop thinking about bashing you in the head with this, snow globe or something.
Or lighting your body on fire.
Yeah, I want to burn you. I'm just fantasizing about it. That's pretty weird, right?
It's strange. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm like the biggest Marilyn Manson fan. There are probably a handful of songs that I do dig. I've always kind of enjoyed his aesthetic, his, thumb in the eye to society, because I'm like that too. But to hear these allegations, it just really kind of makes me feel super icky.
Well, I'm very surprised, honestly, because I've enjoyed some of his music. I'm not a super fan either. And he's also always struck me as a very smart individual.
Well, he seems very intelligent.
When the whole, Columbine, and they're blaming music, Eminem, Marilyn Manson for what these kids have done, I felt like the things he came out and said for free speech and the such, he was very smart and articulate.
Well, much like with the Bill Cosby case, multiple women coming forward and they each have similar stories.
Right.
Which just makes it seem very plausible.
But
and
yeah,
I always tend to believe the victims.
Well, I mean, you have to kind of err on the side of caution and take the victims' statements for the truth unless they're disproven, proven to be untrue.
Not only did Evan Rachel Wood come forward, there's a photographer named Ashley Walters, a model named Sarah McNeely, an artist who identifies herself only as Gabriella, and there's a student named Ashley Morgan. Then there's another female artist and an activist named Love Bailey, and she shared her own experience with Manson, claiming that he put a Glock to her forehead during a photo shoot in 2011.
Oh, well, that should have been on the description of the photo shoot.
You know who else has come forward saying that they were also targeted by Manson, harassed
Who?
over the years? Corey Feldman.
Oh, no, Corey?
Yeah.
Corey was around everybody.
Well, Corey claims that when he met Marilyn Manson, Manson was a huge fan. Like, I grew up admiring you, which, I mean, most of us who are children from the 70s and 80s, that sort of Gen X generation, I mean, we grew up with Corey Feldman.
Yeah,
he was like iconic.
Yeah.
He's in all the movies. You had the two Coreys. I love Corey Feldman.
Yeah, he was in all, like you said, he was in all the popular movies, and he was everywhere, and all around Hollywood, and just always there. Even if he wasn't in a project, he was like in the background.
Manson claimed that Dream a Little Dream, the character Bobby Keller, was a huge inspiration for him in his career. I guess they kind of hung out together. Feldman claims that, he was struggling with sobriety, which we all know he's had his struggles over the years with the drug addiction and whatnot. And that Manson was like desperately trying to get him to break his sobriety, like offering him cocaine and then sort of like making fun of him.
Well, that's messed up.
It is. And then after Corey Feldman like broke ties with him, that Manson for years sort of like harassed him and, just sort of terrorized him.
So, if all this is true, which, I mean, why wouldn't it be with all these multiple accounts from different people? It changes my view of Marilyn Manson. And I think for years people have always thought he was weird, strange, and all that. And now they'll be happy to have something to stick on him.
Well, and that's the trouble with this is he's making other weirdos look bad, because there's a lot of people out there who might share the similar aesthetic or have certain views, society, culture, and are different, but they're not necessarily bad people. And so all this is doing is like reinforcing those ideas that if you're like a weirdo, you're bad.
Yeah,
and that's just harmful to large groups of us who are outcasts and misfits and weirdos, but have good hearts.
But have, good morals and empathy for people and would never hurt anyone.
Well, I mean, I think the cancel culture in today's society, that's just something we could talk about for like hours. Our feelings about that, we won't get too much into it. I think rock and roll has a problematic history, and at some point you do have to separate the artist from the art. Because if you just canceled every rock star who allegedly did a bad thing, there would be nothing to listen to. All of our heroes would be removed, erased.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's okay to still, like you said, you say it the best, separate the art from the artist, and you have them as a person and what they do, and then you have their art. I might still listen to a Marilyn Manson song, but I can still think that he's an asshole and a horrible person if he's done these things to these different people.
Well, there's just that fine line, and you can say that, and some people will want to have an argument about that, like, oh, well, you shouldn't support them at all. And again, it's the whole cancel culture concept. But like I said, if you canceled every artist that had a problematic background, you wouldn't be listening to David Bowie. You wouldn't listen to Led Zeppelin. You wouldn't be listening to Mick Jagger.
Anybody.
I mean, come on.
Anybody.
Ted Nugent. Like, there's so many rock stars who've done some really fucking terrible things.
Well, between just the drugs and the young girls alone, I mean, that would take out most of the rock catalog, right?
Yeah, drunk driving, killing their friends. I mean, just, look at Vince Neil from Motley Crue.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a lot there. So, I don't know. It's just something to think about, I guess, moving forward.
Damn it.
How do we separate the art from the artist?
Damn it, Marilyn.
Well, we've railed about Marilyn Manson a bit. Not really true crime news, but, I mean, kind of. So it'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds. He's been dropped by his management company. His record labels dropped him.
Uh-oh.
I mean, it might be curtains for you, Marilyn.
Well, I think his time had came and went anyway, but I mean, that is crimes. Those are crimes he was doing toward those women and possibly Corey Feldman.
All right. Let's thank our new patrons who so generously joined us at patreon.com to support the show. This week, we are giving shout-outs to Michael, Myra, and Miss F.
Yes, she wanted to remain a bit anonymous.
But we still wanted to say thanks because we appreciate you so much. So we'll just call her Miss F.
Yeah.
And the best part of signing up at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast, Dylan, not only do you get more content, but you get ad-free episodes.
Yeah, so you don't have to hear us talking about a body in a ditch and straight to a Colgate commercial.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Dylan, are you ready to get into this case?
Yes, I am. This is a good story. It's interesting, sad, as most true crime stories are. So let's go.
It's a bit different from other episodes. I'm not sure we've exactly covered a case like this. So it's a very unique story.
Well, let's dive in.
Carl and Sarah Collier were one of those picture-perfect all-American couples who married after meeting in high school. Sarah Jenkins, as she was known back then, had been a basketball player who caught the eye of Carl 2 years her senior, so he was a bit older than her in school. Both grew up in rural Cartersville, Georgia. Carl was the youngest of 7 children. Sarah had very humble beginnings, with her parents both working at a local mill.
Ooh.
Similar to you, Dylan.
Mill parents.
Mill parents. And they were bringing home just enough money to put food on the table, the basics, the necessities.
Oh.
Like, they didn't even have a telephone. And that was one of the things when Carl met her. He was like, hey, can I call you? And she said no. Well, he thinks she's rejecting him, but it's because her family didn't have a telephone.
You literally can't call me.
They didn't have the party line. They didn't have the telephone. Like, they didn't have a way, there was no way.
Well, yeah. Well,
Right.
That kind of sucks. That must be a crappy mill they worked at.
When Carl was 21 and Sarah was 19, they wed. Carl enlisted in the Army, serving in the Korean conflict. After his deployment, Carl found work at Ford Automotive Plant in Atlanta. Then he took a job with the Army Corps of Engineers. Then he finally landed a prestigious job with Delta Airlines as a mechanic. And we all know 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, working for an airline, especially Delta, was like a big deal. Like flight attendants, pilots, I mean, they were like iconic.
They were like superstars.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, really, they had this image of, this is how their life's going to be. And the pilots were all tall and handsome, and the beautiful flight attendants. So
and they all had the like amazing uniforms and so color coordinated, put together.
Yeah, a little different than our listener story about being a flight attendant in modern day, right?
Yes, that was a good
But yeah, so even being a mechanic, being any part of the crew that works on or with the airplane, you were kind of, people's like, oh, you work for Delta?
I'm kind of a big deal. I work for Delta.
Yeah, I mean, I turn, wrenches. I mean, it's no big deal, but I do it for Delta.
Right. Well, the Colliers prospered after Carl gets this job with Delta Airlines. Now, eventually, Carl would become manager at the power plant at Delta's maintenance depot.
Well, he sounds motivated and like a hard worker.
Sarah worked at a bank. The couple completed their family by adopting Kevin, who was born in 1965, and a daughter named Carla, and she was born in 1967. Now, I'm not sure if Kevin and Carla were biological siblings, or if they were just like, adopted separately, or if they were like adopted together.
Okay, but
You know
they
what I mean?
adopted them at the same time.
Yes. The Colliers were middle class, and they were model parents who lived in a nice brick home on Plantation Drive in Fayetteville, Georgia. So our story is going to take place in the early 2000s, and I thought I'd give you a little background on Fayetteville. Fayetteville in the early 2000s was like a typical Bible Belt town. Small, picturesque Main Street area. Everybody knows everybody. The population was only around 14,000, so not a big town.
No, it's not big at all.
Though it was only about 22 miles south of Atlanta, it didn't come with the big city problems, at least on the surface. Most families were church-going, with many of the social activities centering around the church life. The Margaret Mitchell Library, which was built in 1948, named after the author, of course, she wrote the famous Gone with the Wind. It serves as the headquarters of the Fayette County Historical Society, where they hold a lot of Civil War and genealogical records. Pinewood Atlanta Studios opened there in 2014. It's owned by the Pinewood Studios of London. It's the largest film and television production studio in the U.S. outside of California. The studios produce many large films like Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and Thor Ragnarok.
Whoa.
Right? So it's located there.
So is that why you often see filmed in Georgia? It was likely these bigger projects there at this Pinewood Studios, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was the kind of place where anyone different would definitely stand out. And those who were quote unquote unique might not easily be accepted. And we see that quite a bit in small towns, especially back in the day.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I think people are a bit more open-minded about things now. But even in the early 2000s in small town America, there were problems.
Yeah, even if they're not more open-minded now, it's almost like they know. I mean, just things are changing. More people express themselves if they want to express themselves in a unique manner. But yeah, it's almost like that. Even if they're not open-minded, they've just accepted that it's going to happen.
Right.
And they're not as vocal. There's not as much pushback.
Well, I mentioned that because that's going to be an issue that kind of comes into play with our story today. Kevin excelled in his schoolwork and had taken a keen interest in music, which the Colliers nurtured by involving him in various music worship programs, paying for lessons. Carla, however, was quite the opposite of her brother. She had no interest in schoolwork and was rebellious, even called a wild child. By the time she was a teenager, Carla was pushing boundaries. She was skipping school, smoking pot, drinking, and having sex. Sarah was an old school kind of woman, and she did not condone her daughter's permissive attitudes about sex and boys. When Kevin went off to college at the University of Georgia, Carla's relationship with her parents continued deteriorating. She had knockdown, drag-out fights with them, ran with a bad crowd. By 10th grade, she dropped out of school and ran off with a boy named Gene Harvey.
So she just was out. She's had enough.
Deuces.
I'm going to do what I want. Been kind of a troubled child for some years. Well, it seems like they got Kevin on the one hand, who, meets all their expectations. And then Carla's on the other end of the spectrum. So that'd be kind of tough to deal with. And these are both your adopted children.
And for the Colliers, I mean, they're a very active church family and, very God-fearing people. So they just viewed Carla's behavior as sinful. I mean, this just stood against, it was like everything they were against, the things she was doing. And they just couldn't understand why she was like this. I mean, she'd grown up in the same home with Kevin, but for whatever reason, she just had that rebel spirit, I guess. The pair ended up in California. Gene and Carla had a tumultuous relationship marred by drug and alcohol abuse. Gene was also prone to criminal activities. He even stole Kevin Collier's identification for a while.
Oh, no.
Which landed him in jail.
So he stole her brother's identification?
Yeah,
it was like his ID?
Yeah, it was like posing as her brother.
What? Okay, man.
Kevin had to clear his name. I mean, he had to take a lot of steps to get loans removed, criminal charges against him.
Well, that's a shitty thing to do to someone, especially your woman's brother.
Right. So, I mean, I guess that just kind of shows how Gene operated. On March 23rd of 1989, Carla gave birth to a daughter. I'm sorry. I'll get this. Holly Ann Harvey. It's a mouthful, right? Got that alliteration. When Holly was 18 months old, the Harveys were involved in a car accident which left Gene a paraplegic. Carla was not interested in staying at home with a baby and a disabled husband, so shortly after the pair split. The Colliers had hoped the birth of Holly might slow down their daughter's wild ways, but it did little to stop her party lifestyle. She eventually moved back in with her folks. The Colliers were tickled to have their little granddaughter in the house, but Carla's behavior did not mellow. She would leave Holly with her grandparents and go out clubbing, drinking in bars, staying out all night. Growing weary of the situation, the Colliers told Carla she needed to move out. I mean, after all, the couple had raised their children. They looked forward to retirement with plans of traveling, and they just wanted to enjoy the fruits of their hard work over the years, which is totally understandable.
Yeah, and they have that right. They put in all these years raising him, Carla and her brother. And even if a grandparent wants to be very involved daily involved, if they choose that, that's fine. They can have at it with
but
the
they're not
grandchildren.
obligated to raise their children's children
Full time. And now here you have a whole, another young child you got to bring up. It takes years and years. And I just think that's unfair to the grandparents when they end up kind of thrust into these situations sometimes.
Carla moved to Clayton County, Georgia with Holly. She found work as a stripper, something her parents definitely disapproved of. But even more, they didn't like the way that Carla carried on partying and using drugs. Carla would leave Holly with just about anyone who'd be willing to babysit her. She also had a string of boyfriends in and out of the young girl's life, which the Colliers thought was unsafe. Holly's childhood was unstable. She had a mother who was a friend instead of being a parent. Carla never disciplined Holly and was usually too wrapped up in herself to worry too much about the little girl. And I think we probably all know someone like that.
Well, I mean, her behavior to this point, it just seems selfish. She worries about what she wants to do, and is not concerned with what her parents want or think or anything. So it doesn't surprise me that's going to carry over when she has a child with her.
By 1993, Kevin Collier allowed his sister to move in with him. He was working a good job with Delta Airlines and had purchased a nice home. Kevin liked having his niece around, but soon saw how dysfunctional the relationship was between Carla and Holly.
Carly?
I will get that out. Carla didn't act as a functional parent. She treated the child like her confidant rather than her child.
That's not going to work out.
Holly had no rules, no boundaries, and seemingly no respect for Carla. As Holly grew older, the power struggle was evident. Kevin hoped the stability of his home would reach Holly, and it did. The minute Carla was back in the picture, it would just go all to hell. When she wasn't around, Holly was a great kid who obeyed rules, got along well, was wonderful. But again, her mom would come back in, the dynamic would change. Holly called Carla by her first name, never Mom.
Well, I mean...
She had no bedtime, no wake time, no designated time for school or schoolwork. Holly's life was chaotic when she was with Carla.
Yeah, and I don't understand why. I guess if you just don't care, but you're certainly doing the child a disservice by letting them do like this. Children want structure, some kind of
Whether
structure.
they know it or not, kids want boundaries.
Yeah, they want, and they need boundaries to get schoolwork done.
They want authority, even if they don't know they want it. They do.
Well, you're just
they
learning
need it. They have to be guided.
You're learning how to be an adult, how to stay inside of certain rules and boundaries, because you can't just when you grow up, you can't go get a job and just act like you want, talk crazy to your supervisor. You're going to be fired. So you're learning the basic skills for adulthood as a child.
By 2001, Carla had seen her share of legal troubles. She had 3 DUIs, 2 of which she had received when Holly had been in the car with her. She is sentenced to 5 months in jail. Holly stayed in her uncle's care during this time and thrived. She got along great with Kevin, and when Carla rejoined them, again, things went all to shit. By this time, Holly is in her tween years, which we all know that those prepubescent years can be rough.
Yeah, and it's not like Holly has some kind of internal issues that she can't, because she gets with someone who's stable, be it the grandparents or her Uncle Kevin, and she does fine. And then her mom comes back in the picture, and it's almost like monkey see, monkey do, So it's obviously Holly can be normal and do what she needs to do to be a productive teen.
She and Carla fought constantly with some altercations resulting, in fist fights. At one point, Carla put her hands around Holly's neck, strangling her, and the cops were called out. Kevin, fed up, told Carla she had to move out. And the next few years were stormy. In April of 2003, Carla is sentenced, she's arrested on some drug charges. She was selling marijuana to an undercover cop, and she is facing time in prison and eventually is sentenced to prison. So while she's in jail, Holly's custody is given to a woman named Connie Earwood, who happens to be friends with Carla. Connie works at a middle school where Holly is enrolled and has a daughter that's around the same age. It is at school that Holly meets another troubled teenager named Sandy Ketchum. Sandy, as she was called, was born to parents Tim and Sandra. Tim was a truck driver, and when he met Sandra, she had other children. Hoping to make this relationship work for the sake of their daughter, he married Sandra Sr. I'll just call her Sandra Sr., right? But she wasn't exactly interested in being a mother. She wanted to go out at night, sleep all day. Family and child services had to be involved because baby Sandy had horrific diaper rash and had to be taken to the hospital. When Tim would come home, because again, he was a truck driver, so he would be on the road for some days, maybe weeks at a time. When he would come home and inquire about where's the formula, the diapers, extra clothes, Sandra couldn't even tell him where those things were in the house.
So he's just asking about the general well-being of the baby. Do we need anything? What do we have or need? And she doesn't know where those daily items that you use to care for a child are.
No, and if she doesn't know where those are, you can imagine she's probably not the most on top of things when it comes to caring for this child.
Well, that means she's not caring for the child. I mean, really,
She would leave Sandy a lot, clearly neglecting the child. When Sandy was about 15 months old, Sandra called Tim and said, "Come get your daughter." Left an address where the baby could be picked up. He arrived at a house to find the child with strangers and no sign of her mother. Can you imagine?
I would be pissed.
Someone calling, "Hey, come pick up your kid." You go to this house, strangers have your daughter. You're not sure how long she's been there, and there's no sign of the child's mother.
No.
I would be infuriated by this.
That would not work.
Well, he eventually gets full custody of Sandy. Sandra was ordered to pay $35 a week in child support, but never did. She never maintained a residence or a job long enough, so serving her with legal papers was nearly impossible. Tim then married a woman named Mary, and the pair were deeply in love and seemingly had a good relationship. She had a child from a previous marriage, and together they had a happy family until Mary suffered an aneurysm. After that, she started having seizures all the time. Her mounting medical debt put them in a tailspin. Young Sandy was at home with her stepmother and would witness these seizures, and it had a big impact on her.
Well, seizures are a tough thing to deal with.
Finally, Mary suggested they divorce because of the financial burden after she became an invalid. And it wasn't that they divorced because they weren't in love with each other. It was just this catastrophic medical situation.
And that's a shame. That happens to this day. Families bankrupted but just because a family member got sick.
Yep.
And I don't think it should be like that.
Then Tim met a woman named Tracy, who on paper seemed like a catch. She had a good job, a child from a previous marriage. The pair married and had another daughter named Peyton together. And in the beginning, Tracy went out of her way to be good to Sandy. But once they were married, her attitude changed. She made clear differences in the kids. Sandy became sullen, withdrawn, and complained of her stepmother's physical punishments. One day, Tim came home from work early to find Tracy beating Sandy.
Well, I don't think you should beat a child for one, but not against a little pop on the butt for a little, if they've done something extraordinarily bad. And also treating the children differently, I think is a very wrong and messed up thing to do, because that can really give kids complexes when they're openly treated.
She ran away.
Right.
Sandy just couldn't deal with her stepmother, and she said that her stepmother had hit her in the head with fists. He left his wife after this.
You can't blame him.
Well, like any good dad should, right? In that situation. But then he suffered a hernia, needed surgery, and was out of work for an extended period. He couldn't catch up on bills or pay child support, so Tracy told him to sign over rights to their daughter Peyton and that she wouldn't ask him for money.
Okay.
And just sort of feeling like he didn't have much option at this point. It was like, I'm out of work, I'm sick, I'm dealing with my own health issue. If I don't pay child support, I'm going to go to jail, and then both of my kids will not have a dad. I mean, he kind of was in between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So I'm not going to really judge him on that. Sandy was really sad. I mean, she missed her little sister. Here they are again in a situation with financial strain, which even if kids aren't aware that there's money problems, that stress, kids know when parents are stressed out.
Well, and just the fact that the money problems are going to affect them anyway, even if they don't know that's what's happening, You're not able to do anything extra. You might not have certain foods in the refrigerator. You might realize you're you're kind of eating the same thing over and over.
Well, your dad's out of work.
Your dad's out of work.
He's not well. He's recovering, having had surgery.
Also, probably a bit depressed about everything going on. So, I mean, yeah, that could be tough.
And just the divorce itself, and having been in this home where you're being physically abused by your stepmother.
That's a lot.
It is. Sandy, who had once been a sweet, loving child, seemed to change into a very quiet, like almost strange kid. Then Tim met Beth. Now, Beth had a solid job as like a home health nurse and immediately took to the mother role. She treated Sandy like her own daughter. And for once, Sandy seemed to have a mother figure who actually wanted to be her mother and take care of her. But by the time Sandy started Fayetteville Middle School, she was going down a certain path. Sandy dressed like a tomboy, often wearing baggy jeans, boys' clothing, long-sleeve t-shirts that covered up her body. She was super quiet. At school, she was bullied for being a lesbian. She started hanging out with, that quote-unquote bad crowd, skipping school, fighting, and using drugs. Sandy was incredibly smart, though. She was the kind of kid who never cracked open a book, but still pulled A's and B's.
Oh.
And Beth couldn't understand why a child as intelligent as Sandy would throw away this kind of potential. Like a lot of teenagers, she was moody, but her behavior became erratic. She ran away several times. She got caught with drugs at school on 3 different occasions. Finally, Beth and Tim put her in a rehab program. And I should also mention that Sandy was a cutter.
So there was some self-harm as well.
Yeah, she had over 100 scars on her body from where she had been self-harming. And that was another reason they figured out that she always wore the big baggy clothes, long sleeve shirts.
To cover up where she's evidence of her doing self-harm.
Yes, that's exactly why. Exactly why, Dylan.
Yeah, and the answer is always the same when people are asked why they're a cutter. It's they have some internal pain, and that helps in their mind release that for the moment. So I've never quite understood it, but it's more common than I think people think.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, Dylan, and we will be right back. And we are back. It was at Fayetteville Middle School, among her group of outcast friends, that Sandy was introduced to another misfit named Holly Harvey. Sandy and Holly were like moths to a flame. There was an instant connection between the girls. They both liked smoking pot, skipping school, and hailed from less than wholesome childhoods. Tim and Beth at first liked Holly, but that soon wore thin. Later, they would claim that Holly was a bad influence on their daughter. They would notice gas missing from their truck, and they thought maybe neighborhood kids were siphoning the gas. But Sandy was stealing the truck to drive around town with Holly. And you have to keep in mind, these are 13, 14-year-old girls, not licensed drivers.
Yeah, they're not licensed, and they've probably not been shown how to properly drive a vehicle. But they're just taking off down the road in a pickup truck.
The Colliers and the Ketchums both dealing with out-of-control teenage girls at this point because Holly had gone to stay with her grandparents. And it seems the more time that the girls spend together, the more trouble they get into. Eventually, Sarah Collier calls Beth Ketchum, explaining that she doesn't think the girls need to hang out together anymore. Then Sarah drops a bombshell on Beth. She says, "Well, you know the girls are saying they're gay and in love with each other, right?"
Oh no.
Well, Beth is surprised, having assumed the pair were just friends. She agrees that perhaps it is a good idea for the girls to take a break from hanging out for a while. Like Sarah, Beth and Tim see Holly as a bad influence. And Sarah, of course, Sarah Collier, sees Sandy as the bad influence.
Well,
so you've got like these two families pointing fingers at each other's child.
Well, that's how it goes typically. It can't be my child. It must be the other person influencing them or something.
Right. When confronted with this news, Sandy admits she is gay. Beth tells her, I love you no matter what your preference is, but the sexual stuff is not allowed under my roof. I mean, Beth's attitude is, I didn't have sex in my parents' house. I wasn't brought up that way, and you're not going to have sex in my house.
And I don't think that's an unreasonable. They're still fairly young. So
Exactly.
it's not like they're 16, 17, 18 years old.
I mean, it's totally understandable. After this revelation, both girls are moping around, feeling very sad, depressed. When Holly calls Sandy on the phone, Beth tells her, don't call back here. You are not allowed to talk to Sandy or see her. And when Sandy overhears this conversation, she's very upset. Holly hassles her grandparents to see Sandy, and they tell her under no circumstances will you be permitted to hang out with Sandy again. The Colliers, who are very active at church, turn to their congregation for prayers, and they tell everyone that Holly is struggling with homosexuality and needs prayers. Now, I'm sure in this Bible Belt South, little southern town, you got to consider, this is private information, and her grandparents are revealing this to all these people at church, and Holly probably feels embarrassed and betrayed.
Well, yeah, it's fine to be, lean on your fellow parishioners for, support, emotional support, or a little bit of advice here and there. But that is a very personal thing, and that's not really something I think you should get up and talk about.
Well, her private sex life is being broadcast to strangers.
Yeah. And on top of that, they're gossiping about it, how it is about, especially back then, with someone's gay or whatever. So, yeah, that'd be a lot for a young girl to have to deal with.
Well, yeah, I imagine that's got to make her feel some type of way. And Sarah scolds Holly and tells her, you're just like your mother, and you're going to end up just like Carla in jail. You're a slut. You don't want to be like your mom, but you're headed down that path. And that's never a good thing to say to a kid.
No.
The isolation from her best friend, it really only increases Sandy's level of anxiety and depression. She begins making more cuts to her skin and goes deeper and deeper each time. She has a fascination with knives, and that's mostly what she uses to cut herself. On June 10th of 2004, Sandy is outside playing basketball, and when Beth goes out to take her a bottle of water, the girl is gone. And in the meantime, Holly has disappeared too. To my understanding, the teens are gone for about 4 days, and when they are finally located by law enforcement, they're in Griffin, Georgia, a town where Sandy's biological mother lives.
So they took off together?
They take off together.
Well, yeah, so they're isolated away from each other, and they feel like that's the only person who gets them, and they can't talk to each other, lean on each other for support, or even be together. Because it sounds like they're in a relationship. So, yeah, I guess that's all they can think about is being together with each other. And like it would make all this other stuff go away if I could only just be with them.
And this is a tale as old as time. I mean, look, Romeo and Juliet, probably one of the most well-known theater pieces ever in history. And it's the same premise.
It is.
You can't keep starstruck lovers apart.
You can, no matter how hard you try.
No. Since law enforcement gets involved and the girls are considered runaways, they're going to have to go to juvenile court. And Holly's court hearing is scheduled for July the 26th. Now, after this, things get worse. At some point, Sandy overdoses by taking 16 OxyContin pills.
Where the hell did she get 16 OxyContins from?
I don't know, Dylan, the dark web.
Well, that's a lot of
Down
any kind of pills. And that's a really strong pill.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and, Beth, her stepmother, is like a home health worker. She knows the signs of an overdose. And so when, Sandy comes in, falls to the ground, she knows, like, she's taken something.
Yeah.
Has to be rushed to the hospital. It's a big deal. And her drug use, it just continues getting worse. Sandy was really into smoking marijuana laced with crack. And also getting wet. What does that mean, Dylan?
It has something to do with formaldehyde.
Yeah, it's lacing the marijuana with formaldehyde.
Yeah, which I'm I can only imagine what that does to your brain when you inhale formaldehyde.
Get you fucked up.
I would say so. It seems to me, I don't know anything about it, to be kind of in the realm of like PCP or angel dust.
That's what I've heard.
Like
or,
you have
read.
Disconnects with reality, very strong kind of hallucinations and things. So it's a very serious thing to be dabbling with.
4th of July rolls around, and Holly asks her Uncle Kevin if she and her friend Sandy can stay over at his place. Now, he knows his parents don't want Holly hanging around with Sandy, but he doesn't really see what the big deal is. I mean, he's like, okay, these two girls are going to come over. They're going to chill together at my place. And he's trying to be the cool, fun uncle. So he says, yes, they can come over. And he promises not to mention it to Sarah or Carl. However, when he goes to run a few errands, he comes home to find the girls have taken off again.
We should have known, dude. He's trying to be the cool uncle, but they are not trying to listen to anybody.
Of course, when they are found together, everyone is upset. Again, the girls are ordered to stay away from each other. And in the meantime, Tim and Beth have bought a house in Franklin, Georgia, which is close to the Alabama state line. Sandy likes the roomy home, but she soon realizes the distance makes it much harder for her to see Holly.
That was probably part of the reason they moved away.
That is actually part of the reason why they decided to move away. They wanted to get her away from the Fayetteville Middle School, away from Holly. Since Sandy had drug problems, she was seeing a counselor. And the counselor mentions to Tim and his wife Beth that some of Sandy's problems might be her relationship with her biological mom, Sandra. Sandy has confided that she desperately wants to know her real mother. Tim and Beth are adamantly against this, knowing what kind of person Sandra is. But Sandy keeps asking them, please let me go move in with her. I want to know her. They're running out of options. They're unsure how to, help this troubled girl. Tim and Beth finally relent. They explain to Sandy that she can stay with her mom for a while under the condition that she follow their rules.
So you still got to do what we consider the right thing, but we're going to let you hang out with your mom.
Yes.
But, we know that her mom's not going to enforce rules and stuff. We know, she hasn't to date.
When the Ketchums drop Sandy off at Sandra's house, they are blown away by the conditions. It is unsanitary. Dogs and puppies everywhere, a strong smell of urine and feces. The house is stacked with trash, junk piles. The room where Sandy is going to stay is unpainted. It's littered with garbage and just piles of stuff. Sandra has 6 kids by different men, and she has none of the kids in her custody.
Well, unfortunately, that shows right there that she's either not willing or not capable of raising a child.
Not mom material.
No. And as the child, I would be like, I don't want to stay here. I thought I wanted to stay with my mom, but this is nasty, and I don't want to stay here.
Well, the Ketchums are also uncomfortable with Sandra's questionable boyfriend. Beth asks her stepdaughter again, are you sure you want to stay here? But Sandy insists that this will make her happy. As a parent, you want to make your kids happy, but I'm not sure I could leave my child in those filthy conditions with a person I just know I can't trust, regardless of whether my kid wants to do that or not.
Yeah,
I just don't feel like in good conscience I could. It just seems like a recipe for trouble.
Well, it is. Maybe that's in Sandy's mind what she's up to this whole time. It's not so much about going to see her mom as it is like being able to do what she wants to do.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Dylan. Exactly. Beth and Tim lay down the law with Sandra about what's going on with Sandy. Together, outlining the rules, Sandy is not allowed to see Holly Harvey under any circumstance. Sandy is not to use drugs, drink alcohol, or be unsupervised for her own safety. Beth explained that Sandy was on probation and gave Sandra a list of dates, different appointments. She told Sandra, Sandy's life is in your hands, and you better not let anything happen to her. On July 26th, Holly had a court hearing for running away. She was accompanied by Carl and Sarah. A judge ordered that Holly submit to random drug screenings and not associate with Sandy. So now she has a court order.
That's pretty bad when the judge tells you can't
Do
go
not
around.
have anything to do with this girl.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they just keep getting into trouble. They keep getting into trouble together and insisting on seeing each other. And I think sometimes it's hard for teens to realize, look, I'm 15, whatever, going on 16 maybe. I'm going to be 18 before long, and then I can be an adult, and no one can tell me what to do. It's almost like they think life's always going to be like this, like having to follow people's rules and things, and they just can't wait to be their own person.
Well, that's exactly what it is. And I mean, you have to consider they're teenagers. Their brains aren't fully developed. They don't understand long-term ideas.
Right.
Concepts that, hey, you're not going to be 15 forever. Like,
Yeah.
This is a very temporary piece of your life.
Yeah, or if they had just kind of followed the rules along the way as they were outlined for them, they would still be allowed to see. See, that's the thing. It's not like you're these star-crossed lovers and the world's tearing you apart. You kept getting into fucked up situations when you hung out together.
Right.
So, I mean, it's your actions, and you got to take responsibility for that. But, of course, kids don't think like that.
That's an excellent point, Dylan.
But, yeah, you're the reason that you're not being allowed to see each other.
You're being your own worst enemy.
Exactly.
Well, she had to attend a 3-week program called Breaking the Chains, which helps troubled teens learn to make better life choices. She also received 3 months of probation. After the hearing, Holly stormed outside and immediately lit a cigarette, which she put out on the hood of her grandfather's truck.
Yeah.
Carl exploded. He grabs Holly's arm and he tells her he's going to stroll her right back into court and they could keep her for all he cared.
I would ask you, who the fuck do you think you are?
Well, I think in Carl's roundabout way, Dylan, that's the
That's what he
sentiment
said?
he is trying to express.
Yeah.
But maybe with not those exact words.
No, but being a religious man, that's about as tough as Carl could get with the words.
Yeah, and people describe Carl as like he wasn't really super hands-on. Like he was a quiet man and mostly let his wife handle the issues with Holly. Like he would go along with his wife and have a united front, but Carl was not super involved and kind of let Sarah handle things. So for Carl to lose his cool like this was not in character.
That's just outright disrespect. And see, this all this problems and court dates and all this mess. The police, these grandparents are having to deal with this shit. It's just constant. I'm sure it's cost them money somehow, and it's just like after a while you're just like, just stop. I'm supposed to be retired. And here I am going through all this, worrying nightly what she's up to or if she's okay. I mean, damn, he probably just wants a break.
Sarah tried to calm her husband down, reminding him that they'd all been through a lot that morning. It was then that Holly told her grandparents, "I'm going to kill y'all."
Oh.
The next day, when Kevin Collier was helping his father with their painting business, the elder told his son what had happened. Now, Kevin tells him if anything seems off, you should really call 911. But Kevin also thought his niece was just being like a little disrespectful brat and kind of brushed off the threat. Kevin thought a lot about the situation and saw Holly like a caged animal at the Collier's house. With Carla, there had been no rules. Holly could smoke, drink, smoke pot, come and go as she pleased. He also knew his niece was sneaky, and when she was staying at her grandparents' house, she made sure to be like wherever they weren't. If they were inside, she was outside. If they were upstairs, she was downstairs.
Oh, okay.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he kind of knew like she was probably still sneaking around doing shit, but their rules were making her feel like a caged animal.
Well, it's the more you sneak around, the tighter and more rules you're going to get. I mean, it's just like a cycle. It's like a vicious cycle that's just going to keep getting worse and worse because no one, and I think the grandparents are just trying to do what they think's right. I mean, it doesn't sound abusive or, anything like that. But, and it just keeps getting worse because the stricter they get with her, the more she wants to rebel. So, I mean, it's just one of those situations, unless someone involved in the situation takes a step back and decides to either not escalate it anymore or to just try something different, it's just going to keep getting worse.
Well, I've never been in this situation, but I've known parents who've been in this situation. I've known teenagers when I was a kid. I had friends who were like this, rebellious, didn't listen to authority, pushed every boundary, from stealing cars to sneaking boys in the house, running away. I mean, and I see like both sides of it. I mean, you're a kid and you think, I want to do these things. And it is hard for kids to understand why you can't do this and that your parents aren't evil monsters, that they're really looking out for you. They're protecting you.
Yeah, your best interest is their driving force.
Right.
What's best for you, what they think's best for you.
And as a parent, I mean, it can be frustrating. And where do you turn?
Oh,
what are the options?
I dealt with it to a certain degree, not this intense, but it's very frustrating because all you're doing, and on top of dealing with this child and all these issues or this young teen, you got life going on too. So life's still coming at you. I know they're older and maybe retired, but you still have daily things you have to deal with, household.
Right, because Carl is retired, but he owns like a painting business that his son helps him with. So he's got like a little part-time business going on.
Yeah, so you got these daily stressors of just life on top of the stress of trying to deal with this child who just seems like no matter what you do, they just get worse. So, yeah, I mean, it's a
difficult situation.
It's a very difficult
that
situation.
I don't ever want to be in.
No.
Well, Carla sent her daughter a letter from jail stating how messed up it was that Holly was given probation. She also told her daughter, you better fly right and straighten up, then proceeded to detail her sympathies for what life must be like at the Collier home for Holly.
Yeah, see, that's what she gets from her mom is just reinforcements that I understand why you feel like you do. Oh, they're this, they're overbearing, they did that to me, blah, blah. She's not getting any positive stuff from her mom.
Right. You get a letter and the entire letter is like,
I understand.
Well, that sucks. I can't believe they gave you probation. That's some bullshit. And I know what it's like living with Sarah and Carl and, fuck them, but you better straighten up. I mean, what takeaway from that letter do you think a kid is like, what are they going to take away from that?
Yeah, they're going to
probably not the part about like, I need to get my shit right.
The one line about I better straighten up, or the 20 lines talking about you're right, I understand how you feel, and they're assholes.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you can see, this just like not going to go well. Meanwhile, the minute the Ketchums are gone, Sandy starts doing whatever the fuck she wants. Sandra disregards everything they have told her. Sandy wrote Holly a letter on July 31st, venting about everything that had happened. She told Holly, I love you so fucking much, it drives me crazy not to be with you every day. I mean, damn, what do I have to do? She also wrote that it was 4:40 a.m. and everything felt like slow motion as she'd been taking drugs and drinking like all day and all night.
Well, that's not good.
On Sunday, August the 1st, Holly called her friend Brittany. They wanted to hang out, but didn't have anyone to drive them, like to one another's houses. Then Holly told her friend how much she hated her grandparents and living with them was a nightmare. On Monday morning, Kevin met up with his dad Carl to paint a house in Fayetteville. They worked until noon, and then Kevin had to clean up and go to the airport for his job with Delta Airlines. Sarah was planning to leave the following Monday, August the 9th, for a vacation to Hawaii.
Really?
Ooh la la.
Well, I'd be concentrating on that.
She had been reluctant to go and leave Carl at home with Holly, but he encouraged her to take some time. Like, you need to go on a vacation. This is a very stressful situation. A break would do you some good. Carla was supposed to be getting out of jail in a month. Sarah was looking forward to her daughter, assuming parental responsibilities for Holly, and she even confided in friends that Holly was killing them and that the couple was absolutely exhausted.
So at this point, they're like, we don't even know what else to do.
Yeah, at this point, they're just like counting down the days to like, this kid is out of there.
She can just go back with her mom.
Yeah. Like
we've tried.
Yeah.
And we've tried, and it's not worked. So we just want her to be legally in the presence of a guardian and to where we can just take some time off.
She can be someone else's problem. Well, around 3:30 p.m., August the 2nd, Holly phoned a friend asking her, please come pick me up. Amanda, who is Holly's friend, explained, I'm a kid. I can't drive. I don't have a car. I don't have a license. She's like, I don't know how to drive. And Holly tells her, I really need to get away from this house. About an hour later, Sandy called her friend Samantha asking if she knew where to get a gun.
Oh, no.
Now, Samantha tells her, no, of course not. Then asks, why do you need a gun? Sandy said, so I can take care of business.
Oh, it's business time?
It's business time. Samantha jokingly asked her boyfriend, like, do you know where Sandy can get a gun?
No.
Yeah, Mark, the boyfriend, he takes the phone. Sandy asked him 6 to 7 times to please help her get a gun. And he asks her repeatedly, why do you need a gun, Sandy? And she wouldn't answer him. When Samantha was back on the phone, Sandy told her friend she was scared. When Samantha asks, what is going on with you? Sandy told her, I'm going to jail for murder.
Damn, what would you say if your friend was telling you all this?
Well, Samantha told her friend, don't do anything stupid.
Okay, that's good advice.
And then they end the conversation.
Yeah, just chill out because you're kind of freaking me out. And, yeah, don't kill anybody and just relax, bruh. And hang the phone up.
Take a breather.
Take a breather. Take a long walk outside.
Do some yoga.
Go find a bird to watch.
Yeah, read a book.
Calm the fuck down. Chill out.
Do some hip hop dancing or something.
Yeah, but a gun's not going to improve any of this, right? I mean, it's not going to improve the situation.
Well, and I imagine when you're like 14 and your friend is asking you this, you probably think it is some kind of a joke. Like,
to a degree.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
In the early evening hours, Sarah Collier got a whiff of a familiar aroma wafting up from the finished basement where Holly's bedroom was located. Holly had been in her room all day with the door locked, blasting loud rock music. When Carl got home, Sarah asked him to follow her downstairs as she smelled marijuana coming from Holly's room. They agreed they'd knock on Holly's door under the guise of gathering some luggage for Sarah's upcoming trip, which they had stored in the closet.
So they just want to go in there and look around.
Yeah. When Holly let them inside, Carl goes to the closet and begins rummaging around for the suitcase, and that's when he hears his wife let out a scream.
What happened?
Carl turned around to see Holly standing by her bleeding grandmother with a boning knife in her hands. Carl and Sarah tried to pin Holly to the bed, grabbing for the knife. Holly shouting, "Aren't you going to help me?" That's when Sandy Ketchum jumped up from behind Holly's bed. The four wrestle around. Carl is slashed and bleeding, but manages to break a run for it and starts heading upstairs. He picks up a phone in this kind of like area between the living room and the kitchen, but Holly is hot on his heels and she cuts the phone line and continues wailing on Carl with the knife.
Man.
He goes into the kitchen where he's trying to fend off his granddaughter. He staggers around the kitchen island and leaves a trail of blood. Holly is repeatedly stabbing him, a total of 27 times. Then she finally gets him in the neck. And later she will say, it felt like a bucket of hot water being poured on me.
So she caught a main artery.
And that's when he finally collapses and just doesn't get back up. Now, Sandy is downstairs waging an attack on Sarah. The elderly woman is able to get to the bottom of the stairs before falling down. And Sandy stands over her watching blood pour from these various wounds. It is around 5 p.m. that Holly calls her friend Amanda once again, this time asking for some drugs. And then, hey, do you have our dealer friend's phone number?
Man, that was a horrific attack on two unsuspecting elderly people.
Yes.
Your grandparents.
Gosh.
I can't wrap my head around that.
I know, I love
and it wasn't
my
even,
grandparents so much. I could never imagine doing anything to hurt my grandparents.
The only time, and I still wouldn't condone it because you could seek help other ways, I would understand more is if there was some horrible abuse or molestation for, over and over or something till the point where you decided to defend yourself and you do it in the ultimate way by, killing them. That I kind of understand, makes sense to me, but this, for these reasons, it's totally ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I could never imagine hurting my grandparents.
No, it's some old folks, and they ain't done nothing but try to take care of you. You might not agreed with their methods, and maybe they're overly religious or something for you, But still, they've done nothing but try this whole time to raise you.
Well, they're the one constant in your life.
Yeah.
Between her grandparents and her Uncle Kevin, they're like the one, the few people in her life that give a shit about her, it seems like.
Yep.
And really do have her best interests in mind. So she's calling around asking for drugs. Wants to get some drugs. She then calls 2 other friends and tells them, you guys got to watch the 10 p.m. news. There's going to be a huge surprise on the news.
See, they're damn kids. Because it's just not a good idea to start advertising when you just murdered 2 people. That's what it was. It was murder.
In the evening hours, Sandy phoned her childhood friend, Sarah Polk, saying she needed a place to clean up. She claimed that she and Holly had been jumped.
Okay, yeah, we've been in a street war, so we just need to come by and use your sink for a little while.
Warriors, come out and play, right?
Yeah, I watched that movie for the first time not long ago. I didn't realize I'd never seen it.
Yeah, you were like digging the various costumed gangs, right?
It was just the right amount of cheese. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it's a movie that maybe doesn't quite stand the test of time.
No.
But the nostalgia will always be there.
It's true.
If you don't know what we're talking about, you've got to watch the 80s movie. I think it came out, in 80, 81?
80, 81.
Called The Warriors.
Oh, I see. That's
it's on
the thing.
Amazon Prime.
Is this part of pop culture? So even people people have heard that reference so many times.
Right. So yeah, they were involved in like a Warriors type sharks
so
and jets
they're claiming
street fight.
They've been in some kind of a fight and they need to clean up. So can we come by?
Around 6 p.m., the 2 show up at Sarah's house, despite the fact that she had told her friend, do not come over here. Sandy was behind the wheel of a blue Chevy Silverado pickup truck. Holly and Sandy were drenched in blood with a distinct iron smell that Sarah would describe as kind of stinky. They said they'd been attacked, needed to clean up. Sarah goes inside and she brings them out a towel, which they use to wipe themselves down. Both girls are puffing away like crazy on cigarettes. And Sarah is looking at her childhood friend Sandy, and she just, notices like Sandy doesn't seem right. Like she's really quiet, doesn't want to make eye contact with her friend, and she is white as a ghost.
Yeah, have you ever been in a scene or a situation where there's so much blood that you can smell it?
No.
No, I couldn't imagine. That would be very off-putting. I think that would make on an evolutionary, level, even your body recoil because you're not supposed to be around that much blood because that means danger.
Look, I'm repulsed when I'm cooking like red meat and I open like the pack of steak.
Yeah.
And you can smell that blood or whatever in the packaging.
Got a little bit of blood juice in there.
And that's just a tiny bit.
Right.
And when I smell that, I'm like,
So this would definitely leave a mark on you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to go well. Holly finally blurted out, "We just killed my grandparents." And Sarah describes it. We actually watched a video, like an interview with Sarah. And she says Holly pulls up the knife and stares at it. And then is like, "We killed my grandparents." And then like turns and grins at her.
Yeah, that was pretty...
so menacing.
Pretty messed up.
Yeah. Well, Sarah's in disbelief, and she's asking why. And Sandy said, "I don't know why we did it," but admitted that they were all cracked out.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't blame the crack, guys.
The girls stripped naked down to their shoes and socks, which were also soaked through and through with blood. Sarah spots the bloody kitchen knife in the truck. Sarah tells her friends, "You need to dump those clothes and that knife in the Flint River." And she tells them this because she's like, "I just wanted to get these girls as far away from my house as possible."
Yeah, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Right. And she's like, "Y'all need to get rid of those." And she's like, "I told them to go dump them in the river because I knew I could tell police this is where they dumped this, but I just wanted to get them away from my house." Well, when they do finally take off, it's right as Sarah's parents are coming home, and Sarah immediately tells her mom what's happened, and her mother calls 911.
Well, that's an appropriate response.
When a deputy arrives, they give him a photo of Sandy and tell him the whole story. She is able to pull up the phone number that they had called her from, and it's Sarah Collier's cell phone. Tim and Beth Ketchum arrive home to get the news from his estranged sister. Her neighbor had been listening to the police scanner and heard the call about a double homicide on Plantation Drive in Riverdale. Sandra Ketchum was a wanted fugitive. He's like in disbelief when he gets this news, like just dumbfounded, like goes and turns the TV on and is just like, what the fuck, right?
Well, yeah, I think anyone would be.
And his wife's like, what's going on? Beth's asking him, are you okay? Because her husband's demeanor just like went all to hell. And he won't answer her. So she gets on the phone and asks this sister-in-law that, I guess they don't really have a good relationship. Like, what is going on? What did you just tell him? And his sister says, Sandy's gone and done killed some damn body.
Oh, no.
So that is how Beth finds out what has happened. Well, the Ketchums drove to Sandra's house in Griffin, and they're demanding to know where Sandy is. Now, at first, Sandra plays dumb. I don't know where she is. But her boyfriend comes out from the bedroom and is like screaming at her, you know where she is, and you know what's happened. Sandra finally admits that her neighbor had driven Sandy over to Holly's house the day before. Now, by this time, the Colliers' bodies have been found, and an all-points bulletin is placed for Carl's blue Chevy Silverado truck. 15-year-old Brett Shrimshock and his 22-year-old brother, Brian Clayton, had arrived on Tybee Island in Georgia on August 2nd with their mother, Patricia. Movers had spent all day unpacking the family. Patricia left their new home because she was an RN at a Savannah hospital, and she leaves her sons at the new house to finish the unpacking and to get settled.
So they just had moved to Tybee Island.
Just moved this very day.
And Mom's got to go straight to work.
Yes.
Okay.
The movers left about 9:30 p.m. that evening, so the boys deciding, they needed a break. They'd been moving and unpacking all day. They decided to walk around the beach area and check out their new home. Around 10 p.m., the boys were at the North Beach area of the island when two girls in a blue pickup truck cruised by. The two girls stop, roll down the window, and ask, do you guys have a cigarette? Then they are like, hey, can we join you? What are you guys up to? And Brian says, well, we're just out taking a walk. And the girls are like, well, can we join you? Can we hang out? Brian hesitates and then tells them yes. They park the truck and join the brothers on a walk, explaining that they're brand new to town and they don't know anything about the island. And the brothers trying to engage in conversation with the girls because they're like, these girls are really quiet, like strangely quiet.
Like neither of them have anything to say.
Yeah. So they're just trying to get the conversation going. And they explain, we just moved down from Winder, Georgia. And the two girls say their names are Casey and Crystal.
Ooh.
Casey showed the boys some gold jewelry that she wanted to pawn. And Brian explained that he didn't know anything about pawning jewelry. They had literally just moved to Tybee that day. So I don't know where you're going to find a pawn shop. Don't ask me.
So here that they've took off in her grandpa's truck. And which is a little odd if anyone sees them getting out in and out of this truck, two very, very young girls, they're going to notice that.
Well, that's actually what Brian noticed. He was like, that's a really nice truck for these young girls. And he assumed it had to be like their dad's truck.
And they have no money. They have no plan. And they've done this awful thing. And now they've just gotten in the truck and probably already thinking about running out of gas.
Casey and Crystal said, we have no money, no place to stay. And they asked, can we crash with you guys for the night? Brian notes they're clearly a couple. Like, he's like, yeah, it was obvious they were lesbians. They were holding hands. They were acting like a couple. So Brian was kind of put on the spot with this and reluctantly says, okay, you guys can come spend the night.
So their moms went to work all night on a night shift, and they're going to let these girls hang out with them.
Brian fixes the girls a pallet on the floor, and then he calls his mother. Patricia was like, no, we don't know these girls. They can't stay. This sounds like trouble.
At least he was a good enough son to, have kind of gotten this weird situation, but he's going to tell his mom about it so she didn't just stumble into it in the morning or whatever.
But by the time that he goes upstairs to tell them, like, my mom doesn't want you here, they're already fast asleep. And Brian felt like he just couldn't kick these girls out. So the following morning, Patricia was shocked to see them emerge from her son's room. After a conversation, the woman tells her son, I smell trouble and I want these girls gone.
Well, she wouldn't be wrong on that.
She has a brand new cell phone that she needs to activate, and she ends up borrowing the phone from Holly Harvey, which was Sarah Collier's cell phone, in order to call and get her new phone set up.
Really?
So she sets up her new phone. The girls are just kind of hanging out. They have breakfast, chilling at this house. It was around 11 a.m. that the family hears a helicopter hovering overhead. Casey and Crystal grew really quiet, almost acting frightened. Patricia tells them she's going to go run some errands and kind of hints to her son, like, you need to get rid of these girls while I'm gone.
Yeah.
I don't want to come home to these girls here.
Let's clear them out.
Using the cell phone signal, law enforcement was able to pinpoint 3 houses where the girls could likely be holed up. So by now, it's 1:50 p.m., and 18 officers are gearing up for a raid.
So they're about to kick in the doors.
Brett watched the raids happening on his neighbors' houses from his bedroom window. He, sprints outside and asks a detective, are you looking for some girls? The officer is like, yes, we are here to find the girls. And he's like, oh, well, they're upstairs. They're in the upstairs bedroom.
Yeah, they're inside, just in here.
He explains, I just met them last night on the beach. They needed a place to crash. They're upstairs. Holly Harvey and Sandy Ketchum were found in a small bedroom by police. The two were holding each other, scared out of their minds. Both were handcuffed, placed on their stomachs. When Sandy was rolled onto her back, she had a knife protruding from her front pants pocket.
Still got the damn knives on them.
Yep. Holly tried wriggling out of her handcuffs, and a detective named Jordan told her, you ain't fighting with your grandma now, so settle down.
Yeah, with a knee in the middle of her shoulders.
Sandy's police interview lasted a total of 23 minutes. She's just quick to tell him everything.
So she's like, well, I mean, yeah, they're not going to be able, you can't hide this. They're not masterminds or of any type. So yeah, what do you expect?
Holly's first interview did not go as well. She marches into the interrogation room with plenty of attitude and tells the detective Jordan, I'm not going to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, that'll show him.
And you know what he says to her? Good, you little bitch. I don't want to talk to you either because I'm going to send you down the river.
Is that really what he told her?
Yup.
Damn.
Housed at the Chatham County Jail in Savannah, a prison psychologist was sent to speak to Holly. She was tearful throughout the interview, admitting that she had killed her grandparents. Holly said her grandparents had been hitting her. She admitted to smoking 15 to 20 blunts a day.
Where the hell are they getting all this reefer at, dude?
Holly said over the weekend she had been smoking crack. Holly told the doctor that she had been diagnosed with bipolar, but she thought that was bullshit. Sandy's psychological assessment was that she had been high on crack, laced marijuana the night before the murders. She claimed she didn't really remember what happened during the murders because it happened so fast. Sandy admitted to having insomnia and bipolar disorder, for which she had taken prescription, medications. She told the doctor that her stepmother often called her a little bitch and that she would end up just like her biological mother, trash. So it was clear that Sandy had some issues, and they placed Sandy on suicide watch while she was in jail.
Well, I think that's a good call.
Inside the truck on Tybee, investigators found 2 bloodied knives. A bag of bloody clothing belonged to the girls. They'd made no effort to get rid of these things.
Well, that's because they're not even thinking like that.
The media, of course, when they hear the story, they take off with it and paint these 2 girls as mini Thelma and Louise types. They're cold-blooded killers, and they use this lesbian angle to make the crime more salacious.
I'm sure they did every bit of that.
People magazine published a headline, Killer Grandkid. Detectives were quoted as saying Holly was callous and cocky, and she had laughed when they arrested her. Kathleen Hyde is a professor of criminology, and she says in cases like this with the Colliers, there's a pattern where the kids haven't grown up with any discipline or boundaries. She considers this a form of child abuse. In cases like this, young killers grow up with no rules in a household and then are suddenly placed with a person who tries to establish new rules. Typically, 1,000 to 1,500 cases a year come up where a teenager commits murder.
Really?
And often it has to do with this particular
dynamic
premise of,
right.
No rules, no boundaries, and then you're sort of, like Kevin described, a caged animal.
Well, and that's the way I guess they feel, because all of a sudden they do have these boundaries and expectations and stuff, but I still don't quite see how you make that leap to someone trying to make a good home for you to murder them.
Well, typically of those like 1,000 to 1,500 cases of, teenagers committing murders, fewer than 10% of those are usually female assailants.
Really?
Girls typically don't commit these kinds of violent crimes. It's typically teenage boys. So that's another reason why this was such a shocking story for people.
Because it was two girls that killed the one girl's grandparents, and they're lesbians.
Right.
Ooh. Yeah, this would make some great headlines.
I know, who cares?
Yeah, does that make it? I mean, really, if it was a boy and a girl, would it be any different? Honestly,
two people are dead.
Two people are dead, and two people were the cause of it. So,
during the investigation, it turns out that Holly had been planning the murder. Sandy practiced stabbing the bed with the knife beforehand to make sure that it was sharp. Holly had a list written on her arm when they arrested her. It said, kill, keys, money, jewelry.
All right. So there's premeditation.
Yeah. Tim and Beth Ketchum were also greatly impacted by Sandra's involvement. I mean, they lost everything they had acquired during their 4-year marriage, including jobs, their home. Eventually, they had to move in with a relative to straighten everything out, while this, trial was going on.
Really? So it totally devastated their life.
Yeah. So it's not only were the Colliers murdered and it, affected their family and friends, the Ketchum's life
ruined
is, in ruins.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like these kids just did not think of the
aftermath
of this.
And you didn't accomplish anything with this. You didn't get away. You didn't get I guess they thought they were going to get in that truck and drive away and go live together. You got no jobs. You don't have anywhere to stay. No money. I mean, come on. They were just killed for nothing. I mean, not that you should kill anyone unless they're attacking you or harming you. But, I mean, there was absolutely nothing gained from this, not even in the short term.
No. Holly is serving a life sentence for murder at Arundel State Prison. Sandy is serving a life sentence for murder and armed robbery at Pulaski State Prison. Carla, Holly's mother, refuses most interviews, but she did tell the press she felt no responsibility for the actions of her daughter Holly.
Well, of course she doesn't.
Some felt Holly's account of the evening placed a lot more blame on Sandy than she deserved. I mean, she definitely minimized her culpability in this double murder. People saw the two girls' personalities to be completely different in the courtroom. Holly was kind of arrogant, showed no remorse, where Sandy was very remorseful. Sandy has adjusted to life behind bars reasonably well. She earned her diploma, and she maintains regular visits with her parents. She has no contact with Holly Harvey. When asked by our author Kevin McMurray about her feelings for Holly now, Sandy said this: I will always love Holly, but I don't feel for her anymore. I had to bring myself to terms, meaning believing that your crime is not who you are, and I had to try to forgive myself. And I wouldn't do that and still write Holly. So in order for me to move forward and stop living in the past, I had to let her go.
Well, I mean, in hindsight, I guess, seems like she's got a little bit of self-awareness about it, but I don't know. What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where she's coming from. I mean, I think she's realized, what they did was terribly wrong, and that there's no way she can truly feel penance while still maintaining a relationship with this person.
Well,
I
yeah.
mean, I get that.
That's true, I guess.
I also think that it seems, I mean, this is just my opinion, that Holly would have done something like this with or without Sandy's help. But I don't necessarily think Sandy would have gone on to commit a murder.
Well, and I think that's typical in these when there's a relationships, a couple, no matter what kind of couple, they kill for whatever reason. I think that's typical, don't you? That one of the group is way more dangerous than the other one typically.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's very common.
It definitely seems to me like Holly was the ringleader. She had this planned.
Well, and she
told her grandparents, I'm going to kill y'all.
It was her grandparents. It was her. She come up with this. Well, there was really no plan, but she put in the motion, these events, and she didn't sound remorseful during the trials or in the courtroom. So, I mean, really, yeah, I don't see how you can't assume that she was the catalyst of the entire event.
Something that I found interesting after having, completed my research is that Sandy's older brother was a half-brother. He also served time in prison for attempting to murder their biological mother, Sandra, by poisoning her in the early 2000s. And this was before the Collier murders.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess it brings about that whole argument of nature versus nurture.
Well, we had a discussion about that, and you had Kevin and
Carla.
adopted, brought into the same type of home, and raised. And we're not sure if they were kin to each other, but they were definitely raised in this, certain type of home. And you got the one child who does good and thrives, becomes a usual kind of adult. I hate to say normal because what's normal. And then you got Carla who's just off the rails. I'll do what I want. So it seems in that setting that you could argue that nature overrides nurture. Because she's genetically or chemically predisposed to these types of behaviors in some way, or trauma imprinted on her DNA, which there's a little bit of evidence of that coming out nowadays, where you have this generational types of issues that people keep with them, or mental health issues, things like that. So yeah, I mean, what is it? Nature versus nurture. It seems in this case that nature won out.
Well, and if you look at Sandy,
and then
Sandra's mother, Sandy's biological half-brother, I mean, they all seem to have problems as well.
Right.
So, I mean, I just think it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, it is.
If you are interested in learning more about this, one of my resources today is a book by author Kevin McMurray. It's called If You Really Loved Me, 2 Teenage Girls and a Shocking Double Murder. We also watched an episode, and I can't remember the show. I'll have to figure that out. It was, do you remember, Dylan? Twisted Love is the show, and it was called Hell to Pay. It's one of those true crime shows.
That's what it was.
I think on ID, Twisted Love. So we watched that. And then, of course, there's a ton of like newspaper stories, TV reporting, that kind of thing, because this case isn't that old. Just happened a decade or, a couple decades ago. If you would like to drop us a line, you can email mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. Of course, we have an offbeat episode dropping on Wednesday.
Yes, we do.
Join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com, Mountain Murders Podcast, for bonus content. And you can follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Just look up Mountain Murders.
We're all over the place. And can I ask you one more question before we leave?
I reckon.
So I saw that these girls are going to be up for parole in 2020. So one already has been, and 2040. Or I'm sorry, 2024.
Yes.
So fairly soon. Do you think, given their ages and the entire story you just laid out, that they were still juveniles and not that responsible? Because this was premeditated murder in my book, even though they were convicted of something like malice to commit murder.
I think it was called malice murder.
Malice murder, which sounds to be like a step or two below premeditated or something like that.
Yes.
Do you think that that's fair? Or do you think that they were fully capable of understanding right from wrong at their ages, and that this was a horrible, horrible murder, and that they should spend the rest of their life in jail?
You know, I'm on the fence about it. I think if anyone should spend life in prison, I believe it should be Holly.
Okay.
Because it definitely seems like it was her plan.
And she was
like the ringleader,
okay,
if you will.
Yeah.
She was the leader of this.
That's a good way to say it.
And I think that Sandy does seem like she's very remorseful for her role in it.
She kind of got caught up in...
She got caught up in this.
Right.
I don't think Sandy was the kind of kid that would have gone on and murdered like her own parents or someone else. Like
Right.
if she hadn't met Holly.
That's a good way to look at it.
So I feel like if either one deserves to be paroled or given a second chance at life, Sandy.
Okay.
But, I mean, they were young. I have to look at it like they were kids. They do know the difference between right and wrong, but they don't have fully developed adult brains.
There's that, but
and
I mean...
then you mix in their childhood, traumas,
I almost feel like...
the drugs.
I almost feel like...
I don't know.
A certain degree, like you could look at it case by case with these young juvenile offenders, and at a certain degree of viciousness and just horrific. You know, you think about what the victim went through when the grandparents come into her room, just going to give her hell about pot. You know, the usual. They've been over this and over this, and all of a sudden they're in a fight for their life against their own granddaughter and her friend. I don't know. You know, I don't know. I think that was very vicious and horrible. But the way you put it, you think if anyone deserves a life, and it was Holly, then I agree with that.
Well, she just doesn't seem very reformed to me.
Right.
Even her most recent interviews, if you read the book that I suggested, he interviewed the girls, and their responses were just so different. It doesn't seem to me that Holly's really, truly, learned a lesson.
Well, there you go.
In this. I don't know. It's an interesting argument or, discussion to have, and I don't know what the right answer is.
Well, maybe one day we'll have an episode of that, and we'll talk about some very severe juvenile offenders, and we'll give more discussion to this.
But the judge in the case, when he sentenced Holly Harvey, he told her, because of your crime and how vicious and brutal and callous and cold and, just the whole nature of the crime, it's a damn shame that you're a juvenile and I can't give you the death penalty.
He would get, if that penalty was on the table, he would give her the death penalty.
He told her that. And she admitted that she felt that she deserved to die for what she did. And he told her, that's the smartest thing you've said this entire time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful.
I mean, and this is a judge who has criminals in front of him every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that story, and it was a sad one.
We'll be back on Wednesday with an offbeat.
Bye.